Let's all stand up and do pranced. There was a picture of the horse, wasn't it? The horse does that.
This morning I wanted to work with the children on verbs in a sentence. They're learning about a sentence as a whole, and a fundamental part of that sentence is to understand where the verb is and what the verb is doing. We've just introduced the fact that verbs are not just doing words but being words as well, and so we were trying to find them in a sentence. But I wanted to use the book we're using as our Talk for Writing book, so they could see the verbs in context and learn a wider range of exciting verbs to use in their own writing. So we used Augustus and His Smile by Catherine Rayner, and they've learnt and memorised the text just over a couple of days, so we will continue learning it and embedding it further. But it was enough for them to be able to pick out sentences and think about what the doing verb in those sentences were. I thought I'd start them by making them remember that there was a being verb as well, and they had to recognise was as a verb, which is always very difficult if you don't get it right at the very beginning. So we started with that and went through that. We'd done that a little bit before, but it's still very early days in their learning. And then we continued with picking some of the verbs from Augustus and His Smile.
Right. Well, there were lots of fantastic verbs in that, weren't there? I noticed you hammering, Kira. I noticed. Fantastic. Let's have a look and see if we can find some of the verbs in some of those sentences. I've just picked a few. Let's do that first sentence of the story again. Can you say it with me? Augustus the tiger was sad, full stop. Now, what word in that sentence, this is a really tricky one, what word in that sentence is the verb? Kira? Ooh, do you know, sad is describing what he was like, but is that the verb? Let's think. We've got to think of the doing or the being word in that sentence. Let's have another thing. Don't call out. I'm really pleased you said that. Lola? Was. Good girl. And is was, you saw it on the working wall. Good girl. So is was a doing one or a being one? Fantastic. It's a being one. Well done. So what we need to do is we need to put our hammer on was, don't we? He was sad. And that's our being one.
Over the course of this term, we've done 2 or 3 teaching sequences with fiction and non-fiction books, and in each one I've tried to help them find the verb in the sentences. It's an activity from the no-nonsense grammar where they hammer the verb when they find it, and it's a very kinesthetic way of them recognising that's the doing verb or the being verb in the sentence.
He's making it. Good girl. So what do we need to do on making? Absolutely. Let's say the whole sentence with our verbs in, and then I'll put them in. Are we ready? He pranced and paraded through the largest desert, making shadow shapes in the sun, full stop. Well done. I better put those ones in then, hadn't I? We have pranced.
The whole thing.
And we had paraded. And we had making shadow shape.
So as they've gone over the term, we've got a little bit better. It's still early days, it's only November, but we've got a little bit better at finding those verbs in the sentence. No-nonsense grammar is going to be very helpful for teachers because we're having to learn and teach grammar that actually we were never taught as children in schools ourselves. It's a whole area for many people they feel quite uncomfortable with. They're not quite sure what the grammar actually means or how it looks. And then when they do get a grasp of it, they probably get a grasp of it in quite an adult way, and then they've got to transfer that into a way that children can learn and children can understand. I certainly, although I've got a reasonable grasp of grammar, wouldn't have thought about really teaching the verbs in a sentence and getting children to identify and call verbs in a sentence in year 1, because it actually doesn't quite come in until year 2. But they do need to understand what a sentence is. And a sentence can't work without a verb. So actually helping them understand that, I hope, is going to really help them understand where the end of their sentence is. I've got my verb, that's my sentence, it works. Now I can put a full stop and start again.
He gave me some sweets.
Absolutely. What's the verb in he gave me some sweets, Jade?
Gave me.
Fantastic. If I just said some sweets, would you know what had happened? Would that be a sentence?
Yeah.
Some sweets.
I had some.
We need, I have some sweets, or he gave some sweets. Well done. Very good, Jade. I think that's a really, I'm going to give you a house point for that, because you've remembered and put it into something else.
And so I think the no-nonsense grammar is going to help teachers unpick the nitty-gritty of the curriculum, help them understand what the grammar actually means, what it looks like for children, and then gives them activities that they can put into all sorts of different contexts. As I've put that verb hammering context into 3 different teaching sequences, 3 different texts over the term, they can use it in whichever text they're using to teach, whichever context, and help children understand it in a real life way. I think it's going to help subject leaders a lot, because it gives them a resource and a tool that they can give to teachers who may feel not so confident about their grammar, and give them strategies and activities that they can use with their children, and then they can adapt them and use them again and put them into different texts that teachers, and it helps them build up their understanding of the subject matter themselves. The way the no-nonsense grammar publication is laid out, it takes it through the strands of the grammar. And so I can look at what is needed in year 1 and how that will feed into year 2. What's needed in year 2 will feed into year 3. And teachers right up the school can look and see what the age-related expectations are in the grammar and the activities that are appropriate for that. But it will also give them a resource to look back at previous years to help children who aren't quite there catch up. And I think it will also be a very useful resource for teaching assistants who might be working with children who are doing that catch up in interventions and in extra sessions, to help them fill in the gaps that they've missed, because all of us feel we're learning that grammar at the moment. I've used the sentence toolkit for a number of years now, and in year 6 and in year 1, and a year 1-2 mix as well. I found it incredibly helpful for many children who found it really difficult to grasp the concept of a grammatical terminology, if you like. Oh, this is an expanded noun phrase. Well, they didn't understand what that meant. But give them a tape measure and say, well, here's your noun, let's add some adjectives onto that now, let's describe it. And then they made their sentence, their phrase, their noun phrase, longer and longer and longer, until it got ridiculously too long and they laughed. But at least they were getting the idea of the expanded noun phrase. And I found that in a year 1-2 mix, teaching that, because the year 2s really needed it, the year 1s got it as well. So they've gone up to year 2 with a very secure understanding of an expanded noun phrase, to the point where we'd be sitting reading a story and I'd read an expanded noun phrase as part of a story and I'd find children sitting on the carpet going, because they could see the expanded noun phrase in the story. And up in year 6, I can remember talking to a child who was really struggling with the idea of an adverbial phrase and how you could put the adverbial phrase anywhere in the sentence. It really didn't matter. It was their choice as a writer for the effect they wanted to have. And they were struggling about which bit they could move. Once they had that sort of tag of that saw where they could cut off the adverbial phrase and move it around, they became quite skilled at doing it, and they knew, and even better, they could explain that to other people. So we found children who weren't quite getting where they needed to in their writing, really developing that skill of choosing how to write and choosing what they wanted and how to start a sentence, and being able to talk to people coming into the room, or what are you doing? He said, well, I'm choosing where to put my adverbial phrase because I think it will look better here than there. And I know it's that because I can cut it off, and that saw image really helped them do it. This sort of approach of teaching grammar helps children actually latch on to what the grammar means. They have a picture which they associate with a term. They have so many different words that fit into that term. If you're thinking of an expanded noun phrase, it changes every time they look at it, which can be very confusing for them. But if they have that picture model with the idea, they can begin to have an understanding of what it is and what it does and how they can use it in their sentence. The very basics of the toolkit with screwing in the full stop, they're doing automatically. I can't read them a story now without them wanting to screw in the full stops at the end of the story, but it means they're really understanding where those sentences end. And as a teacher over the years, helping children understand where to put in a full stop has always been really difficult, but if they're actually doing it all the time, it becomes far more a natural thing. So I think over the years, as they develop this much sounder understanding of the grammar, they will be constructing their sentences in a far less haphazard way and will be able to actually improve their writing.
Augustus was so pleased. He hopped and skipped and jumped away, smiling. Full stop.